for our work session. We're going to start out with some facilities, building boundaries information from our team tonight.
Updates.
Yes.
Yeah. Before we get started on the formal presentation, just kind of an update for what we're doing in this time of the year. We have some big things ahead of us, and we've had parts of these things in motion. Some of it will be review, and some of it now is work that we need to do because we're going to get to some decision points here over the next couple of months that we really have to put some firmer timelines in place. And then with those timelines, we'll have to do kind of some, backwards mapping with what needs to happen in the interim for some other things that need to take place so that we're ready when we actually get to the point where we make the changes. So we're going to talk today about some facilities planning. We're going to talk about boundaries, and we're going to talk about programs. And they all three kind of go hand in hand, because as we do a programmatic change, then we also have to look at how those programs look in terms of where students are coming from and where they're going to go. And then we also need to put some firm timelines in place with kind of the last big facility project that's been on the list, which is Whittier planning. And so we're going to cover a lot of ground today. We have our work session until you have your next meeting. So this certainly isn't the last meeting, and we may need to make some decisions where the board says we're going to either establish some subcommittee work on this or some additional work sessions as needed, because I think it will take us some time and effort to come at final decisions for time and some of the planning that will go into this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Nold. He and many others have been working hard to kind of keep scooping this into a plan that we think is worth considering and kind of gives you a sense of what we think is a proposed timeline on some things. So take it away.
So good afternoon. As was stated, we'll go through today with multiple things. We've broken the first part up into 3 distinct areas, and then there'll be a couple more after that we'll go through as well with community campus and Whittier. So there's going to be 5 different things that we'll talk about. At the end of each of those segments, we'll have a time for you to be able to ask questions, but obviously if you have questions along the way, you're more than welcome to ask those. But there'll be some natural breaks at the end of each one of these areas where you'll be able to ask some questions if you'd like to. Mr. Morrison and Mr. Kreider have been involved in the process all along, so some of those questions may be deferred to them. But Dr. Boyson and I will take us through the presentation here this morning of that information. So the first part on here that we're looking at, obviously the purpose of this report is really to provide you that information on proposed school boundaries. And we'll talk about some of that input that we'll gain from our community as we go through this process and bring that information back to you. So we'll talk about that as well. Also a reminder, this is for the 25-26 school year. So this is not for next year. We always look at these type of changes based off of December 1. Why December 1? That's when open enrollment starts. So if individuals have a preference on something else, they still have that ability to apply for that through the process of open enrollment. So all of this is backed up off of open enrollment December 1st for the 25-26 school year. So we backed it up off that, so we have plenty of time to be able to go through and gain the input and feedback from our community and bring that information back to you as a board. First of all, if you remember, you had seen at one point in time the photo or the look of this new elementary school. We would like to quit calling it Northwest Elementary eventually here, and we'll get to that part as well as we begin to get into the naming process. But we'll start, first of all, on the information that will correlate along with this. So the first part we did was to look at the development of the boundaries for the new elementary school. And I'll show you a map of that coming up here briefly, but that's one of the parts of this first area is to look at the boundaries for the brand new elementary and what other schools that will impact. The 3 other schools that will impact attendance-wise will be Renberg, Hawthorne, and Hayward. And we'll line that up for you here shortly as we go through and show the maps on that. One other part that will come into play is the one-way Spanish immersion, and Dr. Boyson will talk about that.
All right, good afternoon. One component of that new elementary will be a strand of Spanish one-way immersion. And we know across the district, we've had a high demand for that Spanish immersion one-way program and our two-way program. And we're turning away families from that opportunity. So how can we expand that opportunity across our district, and one of it is to add a one-way strand at the new elementary. The new elementary. And so when we open that elementary in fall of '25, we will have a kindergarten, a first grade, and a second grade to start at the new elementary. And we're able to do that because the last 2 years, so currently we have 5 sections of kindergarten at Sonia Sotomayor. We're taking a 5th section of kindergarten for next year, and then we'll take another 5th section next year. So that would be the incoming kindergartners. And we'll work through that process with the families. So it's open up to all families at Sonia Sotomayor to go to the new elementary for a first and a second grade when we open that new elementary.
We'll look at, again, you'll be able to ask some questions on that coming up here shortly. If you look at the map that's in front of you now, it gives you kind of a little bit of a broader picture of where the new elementary would sit. And so you see that circled currently. You have on the left-hand side where the boundaries are, for the purple being Renberg. The blue was that area that a couple years ago we moved over to Hawthorne, so we'd free up some space at Renberg because the space at Renberg was very tight at that point in time and it was overcrowded. That area would go to the new elementary school. And then you see that there's going to be a portion of Hayward that would be able to go to that new elementary school. So that'll relieve some of the numbers and the counts at those 3 elementary schools, which is absolutely needed. You can see on the right-hand side, that's where the proposed boundaries will go. I'll show you another map here that'll give you the exact distinct lines. So on the next page here, we go through and you can see the streets that block that area off for the new elementary. And you can see again there that it'll impact those areas as listed from the previous screen with the new elementary site, and it impacts the 3 schools that we had indicated. Numbers, when you look at the numbers going through there, there'll be approximately 324 that'll be impacted by that. Part of that number count, if you see in the line that's third from the bottom, the one-way section of one-way Spanish immersion. So that's what Dr. Boyson had talked about. That would start with the first kindergarten, first and second grades. So you see 27 in each one of those sections. The remainder would be individuals who would be coming from the Hawthorne, Hayward, and Renberg areas, attendance areas. So there's roughly going to be about 324 students that will be at that school to start with. We say roughly because we don't know the number that will ask for or request open enrollment to other locations at that point in time, but there's a potential of approximately 324, give or take the numbers that would ask to move into via open enrollment and out via open enrollment. So those are the rough numbers for that at this point in time. That allows us also space for growth, and there will be growth out in that area. If you've been out in that area, there's obviously houses being built and apartment complexes being built out in that section of town. The elementary school enrollment process, students that qualify for busing services will receive busing to the new elementary. We'll map that area out so that individuals will know that. Caps will be placed on that as far as open enrollment. So we'll put those numbers so we make sure we maintain it at a certain number of sections that we can plan for the hiring process of staff. And so we will put those at a base number. And then current students in the designated attendance area for the new elementary school will be notified and can elect to remain at their current school through open enrollment if they choose to. But busing will not be provided back to the current school that they attend. We did a very similar format when we did the boundary changes a couple years ago, and that seemed to work out very well. Matter of fact, that was one of the things that seemed to be of great importance to those individual families that they'd be able to make that choice. I think it ended up being about 10 families that decided to stay in the Renberg area, and some of those may decide to do that again at this point in time. We do also plan to have listening sessions for each of these different areas. So for Area 1 at George McGovern Middle School, and we'll advertise this out so that our community will know that, but we'll have that on March 18th at 6 p.m. There'll also be a specific tab on Let's Talk that'll be set up that'll give a short synopsis of Area 1 that they can click on for Let's Talk and give specific feedback and information back to us so that we can read through that information and for the board so that we know of any concerns or questions that they may have. So there'll be one of 2 different ways that they can, and obviously more than that if they wish to make a phone call or send an email, but very specifically they'll be able to go back to Let's Talk, click on that, leave a response, we'll get that information and be able to, compile that and provide it to the board. And there'll also be the feedback session at 6 o'clock at George McGovern Middle School. I also noted on the bottom there, the naming committee will meet on March 20th, and that committee is set and that date is set, and we'll meet that evening to be able to eventually bring back a proposal to the school board for the naming process of that new elementary school. Questions on the first area of information that we have gone through?
Can you just go back to some of
Yes.
the maps? Sorry.
To the
Without
maps,
having
yes.
doubts.
This one or the next one more?
One before that.
Okay.
Just get a better look at this.
And you see there's going to be that portion that's down there that's currently in Redbird, which is quite a distance for the busing process there. That'll pull into that new area, and that's where a lot of the expected growth will come from. That area that we had moved originally that's in light blue, and we bused across over to Hawthorne because Hawthorne had the additional space at that point in time. That'll move into it. And then a portion of Hayward, which is currently, I believe, Mr. Beek, I believe that's a bust area already, that portion of Hayward.
The Spanish immersion grades 1 and 2. So would we just give them parents options to move into that school?
Yes, we'll give them options and we'll work through that with the families. Our next section on here is the Spanish immersion section, but yes, we will give them options, and really looking at how do we help families in a great new school and that opportunity. So
Can you remind me, is the new school a 5 section?
it's 4.
It's a 4 section?
4 plus, yeah. So it's Sonia's footprint.
Okay.
So like Sonia, right now they can do a few sections, like right now they have a 5-section 5th grade. They have the 5-section first or kinder this year, and then they have that extra space for their SLA. And so yes.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I think space-wise, it makes sense. You can make it happen. And I love offering the option to more families. I think that that's important because it's valued in our community and people see the value of that. I just want to make sure that the product that we're offering is equivalent to the others. And so my initial concerns are having 3 teachers and having only one of them. That is a really big challenge for collaboration. And so I would want to see the relationship with the other elementary schools to be very strong to make sure that those people had partners. It would make me, and we're not going to get into the details, I know, but like sending a brand new teacher who's never taught in a Spanish immersion classroom to a section like that would not be a great setup for those students and for that teacher. So that would worry me. I also think about the resources from the library books and the classroom materials. And I know that this district and the parents have worked really hard to build up those libraries. And so adding another library seems like another kind of hurdle. And so I just would want some consideration of that. And then I think the other thing too is that it's not just about the language, it's about the cultural aspect. And so how could we make sure that that elementary school also had some key pieces of that cultural, like when it was at Rosa Parks, it was great because it was a world language school. So how could we try to incorporate, whether it's in the art lessons or the music lessons or something, that they're actually getting more of that cultural than we might get at just a regular elementary school that doesn't have that kind of strand infused into it. So, and the reason I asked about sections is I was just thinking, like, if we grow to 1, like, what happens if it continues to grow? Could there be 2 sections? And then it's a 2-section of English and a 2-section of Spanish. Like, I think that would be like an amazing option. And so I just wanted to know, is that an availability in that location? And obviously we can't see the future to know how many students, but I think that from a student and a teacher perspective, the support of having a peer and to have other peers as a student versus just the 27 can feel very isolating. And so I'd want
that was a key to the importance of having 3 of them start together, 3 of the teachers, because then you do have, again, not grade level specific, but you have another colleague.
Yeah.
And also the connectedness with Sonia already. So that would be a good piece too, and our 2-way sites.
Yeah. And then the other thing I didn't mention is there's such a learning curve from like an administrative perspective. And so making sure that the principals have a very strong as much as we can, knowledge of what that means to be Spanish immersion, because it is so different from the rest of your school. And having experienced that at Rosa Parks, our principals were always amazing and they wanted to learn, and that really helped the program, I think. So just helping that person to know, like, this is what you're going to do for your school, and you're going to do that for Spanish immersion too, but this is also going to be different because it's not going to work. And so I just think making sure we consider all of those things and have a plan for that is what's going to make the product of what we have to offer the equivalent to what other students are going to get, regardless of whether they're instructed in Spanish or not.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah, we just want to set them up.
Yes, yes, I know.
We want to set them up for success,
Yes.
the best we can.
I think people will love the option for growth. Like, I think that people will be very appreciative of that, because I hear from people all the time who didn't get in.
Right.
And so I think it's an amazing program, and it's offering skills to our students. And so if we can get more people in it, we just don't want to have a option B. You know what I mean? So that's my only.
And that's been our conversation too, with Dr. Zook and Andy McKay and the principals, is really wanting to, they're all quality programs. And so we don't want a lesser program. You get to pick which is most convenient for you by your location or your work location. And we want to be able to have a great quality.
So, thank you.
Spanish immersion. We have more opportunities for you. So as we talk about Spanish immersion, and we were talking about two-way, so our two-way immersion students at Hayward and Rosa Parks are currently in 4th grade. So next year they'll be in 5th, and then they're off to middle school. And so looking forward to where do they go, and really worked with some teams of people, Nicole and Chandra and Doug, and really looking at where all of our Spanish immersion families live, our students live, and how can we provide quality programming, knowing they won't all fit in one school. So we have some expansions, and one is the additional one-way stream at the new elementary, but we're going to add one-way stream at Rosa Parks also. So we'd have an east and a west and a central. And the east side at Rosa Parks would start with just kindergarten in the fall of 2025. So we'd be able to take 6 sections of kindergartners for the fall of 2025. 4 at Rosa, or 4 at Sonia, 1 at New Elementary, and 1 at Rosa Parks. And that would be that one teacher in the one-way at Rosa Parks, but they have the two-way immersion program too. And again, our Spanish immersion team has done a great job about cross-collaboration across the district and really finding intentional time for them to come together by when we added those two-way sites, because we know that is important. So that's the elementary. The middle school expansion. Currently, our middle school program is located at Edison, and we leave that program there, but then add a second site at Ben Rifle. And we'll show you how those numbers came out. High school, to be determined, goal would be, can we have 4, 1 at each high school? Because by the time our two-way immersion students and all our one-way get to high school in 2028, that's a lot of students. And then having that quality program at the 4, and if not, just an east side and a west side. But those will be determined as we see how our enrollment continues in middle school. So Spanish immersion, fall of 2025, we talked about that. The new elementary will open with K1 and 2 section of one-way, and Rosa Parks will start with a kindergarten section of one-way. Middle school will be at Edison and Ben Rifle. And here is the division of the map. And we looked at where all our current Spanish immersion students that are in 4th grade, so meaning as they come up, where do those families live? And we divided it by middle school boundaries. So you can see the right side of the map, which is your east side of the city. So Whittier, Patrick Henry, and Ben Rifle have 54% of our Spanish immersion students. And the west side, George McGovern Memorial and Edison, have 46% of those Spanish immersion schools or students. And that's how we decided which 2 middle schools that could hold that program.
Quick question for students, and sorry if you're going to say this, for students who are open enrolled from other places, how did you determine what middle school
looking at proximity.
Okay.
You know, so if I'm open enrolled from the east side, Ben Rifle makes sense. If I'm south or west, Edison makes sense.
So with the proposal of the new section up in the northwest corner,
Mhm. They will go
then
to,
all have to go all the way down to Edison,
mhm.
the idea.
Yep. Okay. And we will start, it would just start with sixth grade in 2025. It will be just sixth graders that enter the middle school, and then we'll grow to 6th and 7th, 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Yeah, I'm just thinking future
Right.
planning.
Yes, yes. So current Spanish immersion middle school program, approximately 300 students are enrolled at Edison for a little over 100 at each grade level. In 2025, we'll have another 100 students enter, and so we know that we can't put them all at Edison. And that's the why behind having two sites, and you can see the breakdown of the boundaries of which, by middle school, which site they would attend. So we've set up listening sessions. Hayward will be on March 19th, Rosa Parks on March 21st, and then we'll have an Edison listening session on March 27th. And again, a button on Let's Talk specifically to Spanish immersion will be designated for feedback and information regarding those changes.
The third area that we'll look at here today is just, it impacts one of the elementaries and a middle school. So as we go through and look at this one, it's a third area that we talk about. And that will coincide with Whittier, with the numbers at Whittier being smaller than the rest of the middle schools to relieve some of that space and pressure. The conversation on this is to have Cleveland, the students in Cleveland Elementary, attend at Whittier Middle School. Currently, you can see that area that's outlined in red there. That is based on the middle school boundaries. And so the area in red is where Cleveland is. That area in red would then change, as you can see on the right-hand side, with the proposed to be part of the Whittier boundary. If you look at numbers on it, and I can come back to the map again, but sometimes it'll help to see that. But if we look at the numbers on it, it would move approximately 172 students from the 6th, 7th, and 8th grades from the Cleveland attendance area. And I realize I'm talking about it in the elementary school, but it does not impact them, obviously, until they get to the middle school. It would move about 172 students from Ben Rifle to Whittier. We would again go through and give them the options, much like we have with all other changes that we've made. Anyone that would qualify for busing services, depending on their area or location, would still receive those busing services into Whittier as long as it qualifies for that from that Cleveland Elementary attendance area. The 5th grade students impacted by this change with siblings at Ben Rifle for 25-26, they'll be notified. They can elect to stay as open enrolled to Ben Rifle. But again, in all those situations, anybody that's open enrolled does not receive the busing services. Current Ben Rifle Middle School students that would be impacted by that change will be given that same option. So they would also be given the opportunity to automatically be open enrolled to Ben Rifle Middle School. But again, in the same manner, for anyone open enrolled, they would not receive that busing. They would receive the busing to Whittier Middle School if it's a bused area, but not to an open enrolled school if they decided to stay at Ben Rifle. So again, when I go back to the map on that, you can see the area is truly that Cleveland Elementary attendance area. That area has been moved to the Whittier attendance boundary. That'll help with the numbers at Whittier and help with the numbers at Ben Rifle. We have set up also a listening session for that at Cleveland Elementary, March 26th at 6 p.m. And we'll again provide online a Let's Talk tab that they can click on and provide very specific information to that proposed change. Questions on anything of the first three that we have gone through?
I have two questions. I know that when we were planning for Whittier, one of the reasons that we kept the numbers lower there was because we knew we were going to be doing construction and we weren't sure how all that was going to play out. And so does adding 172 students, is that going to change that plan? Is that add additional challenges?
We do not feel it'll add any additional challenges to that. We'll show you the timeline that we're looking at for Whittier. This move obviously occurred before Whittier would be built, but currently Whittier is roughly around that 700 mark. So they have far more space than we originally anticipated in some of that. Some of that could be due to open enrollment. So when I list 172, I do not believe it'll be a full 172, but it could be up to that. So I always want to make sure that we allot for that full amount. Would we still be able to fit that in there? Absolutely.
And then my second question I forgot to ask regarding the Spanish Immersion Middle School. We intend to continue offering fee-based busing.
Yes, yes. And so for that northwest area to come into Edison, we would offer fee-based busing, possibly some scholarship opportunities for families, help with the two-way immersion, families to get enrolled and knowing the timelines and the processes, liaisons helping with that. So yes, we continue.
Both at the elementary and the middle school level. Okay, thank you.
So that is the first three parts of that would be impacted. And each one of those we've set up, and we'll get this advertised out to those individual areas that would be impacted, where they have multiple listening sessions they would go to for the Spanish immersion, obviously being a larger area that would impact, and then a single session at each one of the schools impacted by the other boundary changes. And then for all of which, you'll have a specific tab that they can click on Let's Talk to be able to provide that information. Any other questions on the first three areas?
Can you remind me, did we move to the people from Cleveland initially from Whittier? When
You
we
are
did?
correct.
Okay. So
That
it's
was the
kind of
initial part of it, yep.
Okay, returning them to where they
Yep.
were. Thank you.
The next area that we'll look at here.
Dr. Knowles,
Yep.
let me just, I think that's a good question, and it's good that we remember the kind of the historical moves and moves back. I think that's one of the interesting things about our city right now is trying to predict where growth isn't going to happen. So we build a brand new Ben Rifle, which fills up really, really quickly. And there's a lot of construction out there, particularly of apartment buildings. Both sides of the city have had, all sides of the city really have had a lot of construction. However, what we're not seeing is that there's a lot of influx of students from those new developments. And so trying to predict where family growth, student growth, move-in growth, just ebb and flow of a city that's a growing city with neighborhoods that change will be part of the board's thinking for quite a while. And I think it's maybe getting a little bit harder to predict what that's going to look like, given some of the variables that have thrown in now with more and more housing options of many kinds. So when we talk about this, and now we go into the Whittier timeline, it's what do we anticipate is doable in that area as well, given some of the developments that are going to continue to happen around that with the city itself, with the outer corners, with cities that are now starting to nudge into areas that have had lines of separation until just recently, and what does that look like then as a full large metro area. So let's move on to Whittier, but just good thinking in terms of how we can and sometimes can't predict what's going to actually happen.
And I think I would just like to acknowledge, and I think I can speak for everybody, some of us have been part of the boundary changes already, and we don't take these lightly. We don't try to make changes and then go, oh shoot, let's change it back 2 years later. Like, it's never our intention. And so we can only make decisions based on the information that we have that's actually concrete. And so as we're talking about these things and we're looking at options, like we're really trying to make the best decisions for the longest amount of time, given all the unknowns. And we understand the emotional baggage that comes with that. We all have kids who have connections to their schools, whether it's elementary or middle or high or whatever. And so we want to honor those, but we also have to have great learning environments that are safe and productive for our kids and our staff. And so I just wanted to, I know that maybe that's an obvious thing, but I just want to state that because we really do think long and hard about these decisions when we are faced with them. So I hope that people come to the listening sessions for each of them that are being impacted and help us to hear from you and know that we take those into consideration. And even if we can't implement something that you're asking for, it doesn't mean that we didn't care or we didn't try. It's just that we can't meet every single person where they're at, so.
And every one of these is a proposed, because obviously we want that feedback and information to be able to bring that back to the board to make a decision. And agreed, part of the Whittier administration is excited to have more students come back in. It's easier to set up at least a 3-team process going 6th, 7th, and 8th than it is half teams.
Yeah.
And so this will help them immensely to be able to fill out some of those numbers that they have there. The process through Whittier Middle School, as many of you will recall, and those that may not have been on the board at that time, will inform you that through the process of the bond, it was put into the bond to be able to purchase property if that property was needed to be able to benefit for the building of a new Whittier. And so the timeline that was set out, it was hoped to be done within about a 10-year time period from when we were originally talking through that process. So to honor that, we look here with the purchase of that property going and extending through 2027. In 2026, we would start to finalize those site plans. And obviously you'd be part of that process, but we'd finalize that in the design of what the building would look like. That would come in 2026 and 2027. We would have to, if all things move forward and the board determines we would do that, we would then have to go towards the bond of that new building that would be constructed while we're still using the existing Whittier building. In 2028, construction would begin on the new Whittier building, and in 2023 is when we would plan to have that open in the fall of 2023 for students to be able to enter. Or I'm sorry, 2030, not 2023. So strike that from the record. 2030 is when we would hope to have that new school open. Questions on the timeline there? Fairly straightforward, but that was part of the process. It was discussed extensively when we went through the bond, and part of the money that was allocated to that was not for the building of the new Whittier, but for the purchase of land.
And can you remind me, either you or Jeff Kreider, what are we guesstimating cost of a middle school is? I want to say 60, but is that, am I way off? I'm way off. I'm thinking.
What was Ben Rifle?
Originally, we were thinking 40 million was the way construction was on. We don't have artificial number out of it. Over 1,000 kids or 700.
But Ben Rifle was 40 million. Is that correct?
Originally, but that was probably about 150.
Right. Mhm. But the last relevant
Yeah.
kind of figure that we had.
I was just trying to think from a
pre-COVID.
bond perspective,
Mhm.
like what amount would we be thinking of? And so 60 million stuck out to me for some reason, which maybe it's too much, or maybe it's, yeah,
Right now, it's hard to predict.
Yeah.
28 next year.
sure.
We've gone through a period of pretty substantial inflation, and hopefully that will came down now. But we're at $200 per lift back when we did that bond, and now we're at about $350.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
So that is the timeline that we are looking at for the construction of the new Whittier building.
The last area is community campus. And community campus is our tradition to adult programming that currently is at the Western Mall. And it expanded, so we have students at Axtell Park also. And so that provides services for 44 students at the Western Mall, 17 at Axtell Park, and that's this year. And next year we'll have 64 students at the Western Mall and 26 students at Axtell Park. So where can we house all of these students together? Just best serve all our students, our staff, and our resources. And so really looked at different sites across the city and came back to Axtell Park and worked with Jeff Kreider and his team and Nikki Whiting and her team, and really looking at how can we best use that facility and support our students. And so working with them to accommodate community campus at Axtell Park, and just working on the redesign of one of the floors. So they'll have a complete floor that will serve all the students from community campus, and that would open in the fall of 25. So exciting.
At one point, we were looking at the Western Mall for a consolidation. What happened with that?
Yep. So there was additional site that we could purchase, correct, Jeff? That we could, the additional site at the Western Mall, we could have purchased that site. But then again, looking at what resources do we have in the Sioux Falls School District? We have a great facility with some minor adjustments that Jeff and they'll work through that, contracting out some services to make the spaces fit just right for community campus. It's a good use of our current resources.
I think a couple of questions that I would have would be, I feel like this is a fairly vulnerable population of students, and it makes me a little bit nervous to have them at Axtell Park, where we have other students who are vulnerable in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so the combination of those two populations, where you could have, you know, I don't know how young the students are at Axtell, maybe 8th grade. What's the youngest?
We have middle school program and high school
So
program
you
there.
could have 6th graders, and you could have all the way up to 21-year-olds, all with differing mental capacities. I understand that, but
So we did consider that, Dr. Nold, myself, Nikki Whiting, Denise Kennedy, with the special education program, Mitch Schaefer, admin at Axtell Park, and Jeff Kreider. We all walked through that facility and looked at how we can use that main floor that you come in, and that would be all community campus. And then there'd be a separate entrance, because they arrive at different times, the programs, and there'd be the separate entrance for the middle school and high school students. So that way we can keep their programming separate.
The redesign would allow for it to kind of be its own building while also accessing some of the common spaces that could be used at separate times. In one of my past districts, we had a facility like this, and it was good because you could still have efficient bus drop-off, pickup kinds of things, but separate entrances. You almost have two fronts of a building. Then you can also share gymnasium space, which we don't have at community campus right now. You can share some of the cafeteria space. You can have some appropriate crossover when it allows for it, but it's still a school space. So safety measures, security, doors, the way that we do some of our safety protocols can be consistent. There were some other site limitations to the mall location for making that ideal. And, you know, this is still a proposal to the board. We've looked at some other facilities, but when you look at what it takes to do a redo or a redesign, we just haven't found the right blend of that. Also, the proximity of Axtell Park, just in terms of, you know, getting to other places where our students go for their placements. It's a conducive site for that too, and it's already part of our routing, so it wouldn't be a big add there. But we do also have spaces. I think, you know, when you look at the numbers of students, you can see kind of the urgency for the needs. And if you've been over to the community campus location, they are packed in right now, and we've split them. And so we're also, you know, having some compromise to the program itself when we're in that split scenario. So I think we'd be open to things, but when we feel pretty confident that we can almost treat it as two buildings in one, there are some things you can do with secured, you know, hallways and things like that, where you can control the access to other parts of the building. So that's kind of the thinking behind that. But it's a good question, because there is the co-location factor where some things are compatible and some things aren't.
do we currently own the space at the Western Mall?
No, it's a lease, and we have one 1.5 years. So we have next year is the last year on the lease.
Okay.
But really looking at programming for students and what their needs are, we have the ability to really create a neat space, and meaning we can have the apartment living like they want. We have that community work that they will do at Axtell Park, but also with community partners. There's the public transportation that the students access. It's right there. So just some really great opportunities to create a space that is unique for them, that meets exactly what they needed. Right now, they're using the Fax Kitchen at Axtell, because that's where their part of their program is. And that serves their needs very well right there too. So again, making some improvements and adjustments to redesign it to meet their needs.
And then my other question would be, and I don't know how much conversation has been had or with who, but my question would be is, as a parent, when my child graduates from high school and now they're going to continue on in their support services that we offer until they're 21, is there any, I don't know what the word would be, but any kind of heartache or any angst about returning them to another K-12 building versus having them kind of have that independence of being able to go to another? Does that make sense what I'm trying to say? Like,
You know, it's really about the programming that's provided at the facility, wherever the facility is, and their programming sets it apart from, it doesn't look like a school setting, even though it's in a school. The tasks that they do, the skills that they work on as part of their continuing on look very different. And so that is, they're talking, a couple of rooms will be set up just for really those life skills. And they don't have a facility that can be set up like that right now. And so excitement around that support that we can offer for students that we've never been able to with the redesign.
Just food for thought for the board. You know, if you go out for a bond for the Whittier project, that's kind of your next point of opportunity. If at that point we're growing with one program or another, and you want to vision some future brand new space, that's going to be the point of opportunity, whether it's a standalone or it's a, you know, a specific add-on to a Whittier if the footprint allows for it, if it's another enhancement to another building or a redesign, but that's another point of opportunity to think about for the future of any programming, is if you're going to expand and it requires a facility expansion. We also don't know in certain areas of our city, is it going to continue to support, and can we redesign some spaces maybe in other locations? I don't know, but you still have to have those dollars to do that. So just something to think about.
and do we have an estimate of how much it would cost to update Axtell Park to reconfigure it for this?
We're just getting those. We haven't had the final design, so we don't. But to purchase another facility is millions of dollars.
Sure.
Will
And
there
then the
be-
renovation.
will there be any programs displaced because of that movement,
Nope,
or you don't
nope.
know?
They'll all stay intact.
Isn't there a daycare on that floor
Yep,
on the
yep,
side?
there is.
Would
and
that stay there?
That would stay right there. Mhm.
Thank you.
So don't parents have the option after the 18 graduation
That is
to
the,
continue at their high school?
correct. No, not, they don't continue at their high school. If they're continuing on with this programming, they go to the community campus.
So they're not allowed to stay.
at their
They
high
used to
school.
be. I mean, I'm pretty sure when I was
Some-
at
there's
Washington.
Some
some.
have stayed, and so they work on that as part of the transition services. So some have stayed an additional year, and that has happened. Rarely ever would you see somebody stay all the way through to 21, because it would forego some of the processes of the transitional services. They'll stay in a program through the age of 21, but not at their home high school, original home high school. And that's part of the piece to be worked on, and the discussion that was had is a separate entrance, so they'd be able to have ability to build an apartment right there, and make some of those setups there, so they could use that fax room as perfect setup for their cooking and things of that nature to be able to learn those skills. But most all of which will go to some type of another setting. Some have, and we looked at some of that, stayed another year. Part of it also with the expansion is it helps to not need to place kids in other locations. We have those facilities right here within our own school district, and would have that manned by our own staff. And as Dr. Boyson had stated, when looking at, the current facility we have, we can designate a specific floor for the students and renovate that to meet their needs and still have the room for the middle and high school to be separated away from them.
And do we know what our goal for capacity for students would be with this renovation?
Right
Because if we're going to be around
Yep.
100.
So coming up in 2025, 26, they're looking at 119 students projected. And so this building has double the capacity that we have at the Western Mall and Excel Park programs right now. Some of their classrooms are about 400 square feet, and some of our classrooms at the Excel Park building are 1,200. And so we could split one of those and have two classrooms that are bigger, than what they're currently using right now. So just really some great visioning of what that can look like for our students. And it will look different than a traditional school.
And I just want to clarify, just in case anyone is watching or listening, when you say apartment, it's not like someone's going to live there. It's just a
Simulation spaces. Yep.
simulation space. I just, in case anyone's thinking, someone will live there?
Practice making the bed and have a kitchen and just those
The life
types of things.
skills.
So real life skills.
Thank you.
I think for me, I would benefit from being able to see the current community campus and then also kind of the Axtell Park Envision stuff. So I might reach out to somebody, whoever that would be, to see if I could just swing through. And that would just help me because I walk by the community campus when I'm walking at the Western Mall, but I've never been inside to see how is that set up. And then just being able to understand how that separation would look at Axtell Park, I think would help me kind of wrap my head around that.
So we can get you connected to tour the current community campus. And then once we have the visualizations for the drawings for the new rendering, we can share this with you.
Thank you.
We can obviously go back through and answer questions on any one of the parts that we've gone through, the three main areas of transition, the Whittier building process and community campus. So any of those that you would like to have any questions answered on, we'd be happy to. At this time, though, we'd make a recommendation to acknowledge the proposed school boundary and program changes for the fall of 2025. And again, we will gather that information and at a future either work session or report, bring that back to the board so you would have that information as well from both the Let's Talk and the listening sessions. Those will carry on through the month of March. And so sometime after that point in time, we bring that information back to you.
So to clarify today, we are just acknowledging the information that you presented to us. We are not approving anything that you just presented. These are just the ideas that you want us to say, yes, we acknowledge that we heard them.
You are correct. An approval of this process would happen at a much later date after we've had the feedback and information. So this just an acknowledgement of the original report that we've gone through with you. Hopefully we'd come back at a different time with changes that have been proposed, and then you would have the ability at that point in time to be able to go through and either seek out additional information, create changes, or approve what would be proposed at that time.
My one last question I was just thinking about as I was looking at all of the listening sessions, would we do a listening session for our community campus or would that not? It seemed like we had one for every other kind of facility change, but I don't know. We didn't have something listed for that, and I don't know.
The two later ones, we did not have a listening session set for, which would be obviously the building of Whittier and the community campus. The three earlier ones that would go into effect with boundary changes and school changes there, we did have listening sessions for a program changing.
I would just say with community campus, we're not changing the program.
Okay.
We're changing the location, which actually allows us to enhance the program. And so I think we would probably expect that parents would not be concerned because we're not cutting it or, fundamentally changing what that program is. But we could also let them know what we are planning to do, and if they'd like to offer feedback, we could be intentional with that.
Or maybe putting a button out there for Let's Talk, just like
we
you
could do
are
that.
for the others. Just because that one's sooner than Whittier. I get Whittier. We kind of all have that in our mind. We're not going to move the location of that to some other random place. That's not what we've always been talking about. So I would just be curious, maybe from a parents who would be impacted, or even some staff members that, I mean, they're working in this environment every day. Like, do they have feedback or ideas of?
Yeah.
They do. So,
I
so it would be
think
nice to hear, you know, both support and suggestions as we're looking at even what that design might look like. If they're saying, here's what we really love about community campus, is there something that we could take from that and make sure that we implement it on a bigger scale, or whatever it is? I just think that would be super helpful in that process too.
We can do
So,
that,
thank you.
absolutely. Yeah.
If you remember, I'd have to go back and look at the date. I believe we had a presentation specific to community campus. So we'll pull that and send that back to you so you can kind of do a refresh of what was presented in that. And the space design, I think it will be helpful to kind of get a vision of it. One of the best examples of that I ever saw was a district that had declining enrollment to the point where they had closed an elementary school. It was a small elementary school, and they had redesigned it for a program like this, and each classroom was a simulation space. So there was a work simulation where they actually had work that they brought in from partner companies. There was a life skills living kitchen apartment. There was a culinary space, washing machines, you know, all of those. But there were also then simulation spaces to go in and apply for a job and to fill out applications. So having multiple rooms to spread all of those experiences out in was just really, really neat. And we would be able to do a version of that. You know, I think the community campus space has been good for the things that you talked about, and kind of being out in the real world, and the central location for students to go out for their job experiences has been good. But we know that one of the most important things that we've heard from staff and parents is permanence of the location, because what we don't want to do is, you know, have to do this again in 2 or 3 years where we have to move it again. And so I think that permanence feature is important. Luckily, we aren't closing an elementary right now, but it's some of those underutilized spaces that can be really conducive for this type of a redesign. But we'll go grab that, and then we'll include that. The other thing that I was going to say is we may need to look at our work session schedule and really think about scheduling 1 or 2 sessions specific to Whittier now as a follow-up to this, so that we can kind of keep honing in on what it's going to require of the current projected plan, particularly if we're going to continue to acquire other properties and if we're going to lock in the location. So I think we need to do that by, you know, June, and really have a firmed up plan of that.
Sounds good. Any other questions or comments from anybody?
Just curious how families are getting notified of the talking sessions.
Say that once again, I'm sorry.
How are caregivers getting information on the listening sessions?
Yep. So we're going to send that out, and information that we'd send out through the Sioux Falls School District by all those areas that would be impacted. Obviously, Spanish immersion will be impacted across. We're also sent the information out that you're seeing now today to the schools. So schools will be able to share that with their staff and keep them informed that way. But as far as communicating this out with our community, our parents, it'll go out to all those specific individuals, and it'll show them where they can provide the feedback at, and at what date and time the locations will be for the listening session.
But not just email.
It'll go out in more than just the email. I mean, we'll use our communication tools. As far as a mailed letter, a hard copy, we had not planned that. The part would go out through all of our thorough share information, will be posted on our website, but we'll contact each one of those that would be impacted, so they'll have that information.
It'll be by family,
but-
by school, social media, direct right to you.
At the schools
Have
themselves.
it on their
Mail, text.
newsletter.
I mean,
Mhm.
So it'll come in multiple forms.
Yeah.
But it was not intended to have it be a mailing out to individual families. Usually we get to the point where if things are going to be approved, then we do send out a mailing to individual families as far as the open enrollment process. Because they have a document they would need to, or they'll respond back electronically if they choose to. But we will use multiple forms to be able to get the word out to individuals. Obviously with media will help in a lot of that aspect. It'll pique some of the curiosity today, and then when we send the information to them, they'll at least know that it does specifically apply to them.
And then a couple of clarifications. Will it be sent in Spanish?
That's
Yes, and,
different
and we
languages.
also will have interpreters at Hayward and Rosa Parks.
Okay.
Yes.
And then is the intention that if I am a Hayward student, I would go to the Hayward meeting? Like, we don't necessarily want people from Hayward showing up to Cleveland's meeting to talk about Cleveland, for example. Like, or is that, or are all topics available at all?
No.
That's kind of what I want to
It
clarify.
is very specific to the school that would be listed in there. So as we went through and talked about Area 3, the listening session specific to Area 3 will be this. And we'll send that information that if they have an interest in meeting face-to-face and in hearing the information, it'll be a shorter presentation.
Sure.
Because it's just one specific area. And then most of the time is spent listening and to get feedback from them.
Okay.
Just because of the broadness of the Spanish immersion process,
Right.
we had 3 so that it could be on the different parts of towns, then at the middle school as well.
And so Spanish immersion families really could go to any of the 3
could.
because that's the
Yes.
topic. But as far as the others, making sure
Yep.
that that's okay.
Correct. And we'll, when we communicate that, it's a great point. We'll communicate that very specifically on
Okay.
that.
Thank you. All right. If no other questions, can I get a motion and a second to acknowledge the proposals that we saw today?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That is acknowledged. Do we have anybody from the public who wanted to comment on any of the information that we just received? Nobody? All right. With that, I will take a motion and a second for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.